VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. So the basic idea of VPN is to allow us to use a shared infrastructure like the internet, for example, and allow our company to send data securely through this shared infrastructure. And in this lesson, the idea of virtual private network is achieved through the use of encryption. So by encrypting the data before we send onto this shared infrastructure, only our company devices, routers for example, are able to encrypt and decrypt the messages. Other companies, even if they manage to get hold of our data, they will not be able to see the information because it has been encrypted. So in this lesson, the idea of VPN, virtual private network, how to use a shared infrastructure for private usage, is achieved through the use of encryption. So what are the benefits of VPN? Now, if you buy a WAN connection through a service provider like Singtel, for example, so the further the connection, the further they have to charge you. So if you go from Singapore all the way to New York, they have to charge you for all the connections from Singapore all the way to New York. Now, using the idea of the internet to connect our Singapore to New York office, both sides will just have to buy a local internet connection, which is much cheaper, and the internet is sort of free for all. So this shared infrastructure called the internet is kind of free for all to use. So that's why it presents a considerable cost saving, because you don't really pay for the internet. You just buy a local connection into the internet, And security, because as you send things through this shared infrastructure, to protect your office data, you encrypt the information before sending into this shared internet cloud. And of course stability, because it's much easier to have a lot of redundancy built in to connect into this internet cloud. And this internet cloud have many ways of going to the respective sites. So it does provides a lot of redundancy. Because it's cheaper, you can buy another internet link into the cloud. So one link, for example, you buy a SingNet connection, because it's a local connection, you have enough budget, okay, to buy another StarHub connection into the internet cloud. Remember, the internet is sort of free for you because it's this abstract clouds that it's owned by everyone. So VPN, virtual private network, can be deployed as a site-to-site solution, whereby you are using VPN to connect one office through a open infrastructure like the internet to another site. Site means groups of users. Okay. So VPN, site-to-site VPN, can be used as an alternative to your classic WAN connection. Now, another kind of VPN is what we call remote access VPN, whereby you are using VPN connections to allow mobile users to connect back to the office. So the mobile users can use some kind of temporarily dial-up connections to connect back to the office. So that's why it's called a remote access virtual private network. Site-to-site VPN, we tend to use things like leased lines to connect into the internet. Remote access VPN, we use temporary connections because we assume that our users are mobile. So the users can be anywhere. So they use temporary connections back to the office, such as some kind of dial-up connection, or heck, some kind of hotel internet connection. Now, to help us set up VPN easily, Cisco developed this concept called Cisco Easy VPN, which is not covered in detail in this class. We merely highlight to you that Cisco has this facility or this feature called Easy VPN that will allow us to easily set up VPN connections. And this Cisco Easy VPN comes in a few components. It can help you easily set up the server end. It can also help you set up the client end easily. Now, please ignore the typo here. There's a mistake here. Now, using encryption to facilitate this VPN connection, well, there are two kinds of encryption solutions. First is what we call the IPsec VPN solution. Well, IPsec is a layer 3 encryption service. So what does this mean? That when IPsec was created many years ago at layer 3, it doesn't care what application is being used. So it can be a telnet, it can be a FTP, it can be a HTTP. We don't care what application is being used. So long as you're using IP, we can encrypt it. So it is, when IPsec was developed, it's application independent. But the disadvantage of IPsec, it is more CPU intensive, as well as if you're using what we call mobile users to do IPsec, they has to be loaded with a IPsec software. Now, the other alternative to doing encryption type of VPN is what we call SSL VPN. Now, SSL VPN is what we call web VPN because SSL is an encryption service used by the HTTP browser. So when SSL VPN was first introduced, it offers a lightweight encryption service as compared to IPsec. One thing, it is less CPU intensive, and another, you don't have to load any IPsec software because the browser itself can do SSL encryption already, so you don't have to load anything. But the trade-off is, in the old days, it has to be a browser type of activity. It must go through its application specific. So it must be a browser type of activity. So in the old days, when companies are deploying SSL VPN, all the user experience, all the user interaction has to go through a browser. So if you want to do an FTP to the corporate server, we have to do FTP through the browser. If you want to do telnet, we have to do telnet through the browser. Have you seen web page with embedded browser function in there, web page with embedded FTP function, or some kind of GUI to do FTP download without actually going through a actual issuing FTP commands. So that's the old days. Now the idea of using SSL VPN is so popular these days that people like Cisco has taken SSL VPN, which used to be a HTTP specific feature, SSL tied to HTTP services. Now they make SSL application independent, which means you can have native telnet, native FTP going through SSL without having to be in a browser mode. Native telnet, native FTP being encrypted by SSL without having to do things through the browser. But this is not covered in our class. Okay, this is not covered in ICND, but I just want you to know. In the classical environment, in the classical argument, IPsec is application independent. And when we do SSL VPN or web VPN as you've seen here, it is application specific, in a sense that the SSL encryption has to be done through a browser. So which means in the classical SSL VPN solution, all activities has to go through a browser. Remember, the modern day SSL VPN these days is application independent, but it is not covered in this class. Okay,